Hey guys, what is up? Lord Nick here, bringing you another League of Legends related video. In this video, I want to talk about the LCS Week 1, and it's not all of it. I'm not talking about all of it. I'm just talking about Clutch Gaming, guys. Clutch Gaming being my favorite team, that's who I wish to talk about and who I wish to break down. And they're a lower end team, so it's somebody that doesn't get covered by a lot of people as much, so I want to break down some of the analytics of it. And by analytics, I mean just personal opinions and spectator views, uh, more so than the actual statistics of it. Statistics can be boring, cut and dry to some people, but based off of those statistics, I'm making some guesses, estimated guesses, and predictions that I hope for this team to be going with. Now, that also being said, I've also reviewed the VODs of both of their games this weekend a couple times each, and I want to say that I was very impressed with their performance with Optic, and I was impressed with a few things they did with the C9 game. I was also very disappointed with most of the C9 game. So we'll be touching up on the good things from the C9 game, as the bad things in the C9 game were much more evident. As for the Optic game, I think that game was a very close game, and we should be looking at what was good in that game. And from this weekend as a whole, I want to take the positives away opposed to the negatives. Of course, the negatives were 0-2. That's not a great start. But the positives were what we got to see that we didn't see last split. Just this week alone, we got to see a lot of what seemed like individual improvement from each of the players that played last split. Cody Sun seems like he is a straight upgrade to Piglet. Mind you, tons of people on the subreddit seem to think that Piglet would have been better than Cody Sun. Somehow they would have won with Piglet. Remember this, guys. The team with the ninth. None of their players ranked higher than maybe fourth in their role, and the person that ranked fourth in their role might have been Vulcan. He was arguably able to be one of those higher up supports, and that's only because the supports in NA kind of stopped after the top three teams. Like, there was no real, hey, the supports are a big player on these teams after those teams. Even Avramu, down in the 10th place team, probably still statistically was very close to most of the other ones. Vulcan was only higher because he seemed somewhat impressive and flashy in his opening split. Mind you, he probably wasn't much better than almost any other support on the teams other than the top three. So let's look real quick at how this week's shaped for each of these players, though. We'll get back to the Piglet point later in the video. I want to talk more about how I think people are overglorifying Piglet, but we're going to talk about this week first. We're going to talk about the goods of this weekend, and we're going to talk about the Optic game. That is a very long game that happened to be a loss, but guys, look, they were losing that game for a good 25 minutes, and they held on and almost made some comebacks there. Did they? No. Did they execute properly to make those comebacks? No. Was it their fault they lost? Yes. Could they have won? Probably. Where did they fail? Where did they fail, guys? They failed because, unfortunately, their composition got worse as the game went on. Normally, that composition could scale really well, and they were actually doing relatively good damage as the game went on. The problem was is they didn't have any closure in that game. They couldn't get onto the back line and kill the ADC like they needed to, and they didn't have enough damage to burst through the little, the big old meat wads that were up front, blocking all their damage. Meanwhile, the TF could split push, and they didn't have a good answer. They needed Huni there for team fights. He was the only one with a TP, so Damonte would have to go answer TF in the side lane, and if his team engaged too far on the other 4v4, TF could TP over and get in the fight before Damonte could. So overall, I think their composition got outdrafted by the playing, or how Optic was playing that composition. I think Optic played their composition a very odd way, but the proper way to win it. This wouldn't have been the, optimum way for that how that comp was built to play, but it was the optimum way to play to make sure they could succeed in that game. So I think Optic just played it very well. CG definitely had their mistakes where they overengaged a few times and inevitably lost a big fight towards the end, which lost them the game. But there was a lot of positives from this, and one of the big ones was Lyra. Guys, last split, I remember being on the train of giving Lyra so much crap for not showing up in the early game, or going in the early game to do early ganks and standing in a bush and doing nothing. Now, mind you, he did a lot of standing in bushes doing nothing, but he also did a lot of pressure and did a lot to make sure he could take the enemy camps. He watched the pathing of enemy junglers. He proceeded in both games to get a 3-buff lead over his opponent. That's pretty big, guys. That's pretty awesome overall. On top of that, he managed to do a couple of early ganks that succeeded in his team's favor opposed to the enemy team's favor. The C9 one became a bloodbath down and towards the bot lane, but Huni was able to push and get a tower plate. He did fall behind on CS, unfortunately, because Pyke doesn't have that much damage early on, and probably was not the best for pushing early on. He wasn't expecting to, and so he kind of fell behind on that regard. And then on top of that, Licorice got kills, which then put him ahead. So there's just not that did look bad, but otherwise, in both of the games, in Optic and the C9 game, Lyra looked really solid in his early game play and ability to make plays happen. So, and his decisiveness in team fights did win them a few. Now, they did lose a few, but he overall, I think, played very well in comparison to the last split alone. In comparison to the last 3 splits I've seen him play in, I think this was one of the best showings he's had in a week 1 in a while. Now, mind you, Damonte played pretty dang well both of these games. I think he was a very good shining light. Even in the losses, his statistics were not bad, and overall, he did play his role very well. The first game against Optic, like I said, TF was, Crown was playing very well to what his team needed him to be, which was split push pressure, which Damonte could answer, but then couldn't answer if he roamed back to go fight the team, because TF could get there a lot faster with his TP from his ultimate, opposed to Damonte having to run all the way over there. So, all in all, I think his performance was probably pretty solid. He didn't give up any early kills. He didn't int like, we saw him do somewhat last split. So, overall, very impressed with him. And let's move to Huni. Huni showed massive improvement. He got put behind in the C9 game and played from behind and didn't int. That was great. And even in their 2v2, it wasn't that he played it poorly or Lyra played their 2v2 poorly. Svenskeren and Licorice just happened to outplay them. They had the summoners, they had the abilities, and they just positioned really well and timed their abilities just perfect to counter the other two. So, all in all, I was very impressed with Huni's Rumble as well. His Rumble had many a time where his equalizers just set the tone of the team fight. Pretty much every team fight was determined by Huni's equalizers in the game versus Optic. Many of the ones that they won was because of Huni. Many of the ones they lost was also because of Huni, but more so because the enemy team would split up and he had to get an equalizer down. And unfortunately, it wouldn't always be in the best positions. Now, it would zone, but it didn't always do the damage it needed to do, which wasn't 100% his fault. The enemy team just played around it, so there's only so much you can do with a very linear ability like the carpet bomb coming from Rumble. Anyhow, let's talk about the last one. Like I said towards the beginning of this is the most undervalued side of the map, I think, so far, actually, because of people with their nostalgia goggles looking at Piglet like he's a god. Cody Sun got looked over and thought of, oh, we lost because we put Cody Sun in, not Piglet. That is 100% false. Cody Sun and Vulcan, I think, were the best on this team. As much as I could have said that the other 3 had massive improvement, Cody Sun seemed like a strict upgrade to Piglet. Piglet last split just didn't have an identity. Some games he was extremely aggressive, other games he was just never there. He didn't do anything. So, statistically, yeah, he wasn't the reason they lost, but he wasn't the reason they were going to win. He was the Tony Romo of the team, really. He could show up, and when he showed up, the team won. But most times he played to not lose opposed to playing to win, which just meant that the team was going to be behind no matter what. These 2 games, Cody Sun and Vulcan both showed some exceptional ability to take control of their lane. Lyra showed some very good ability to pressure and control vision and pressure objectives. So I think just looking even at it, let's look at the CSing that Cody Sun had. He was ahead on CS both games. He was ahead in gold against his lane opponent both games. That's great. What Piglet had did last split? He wasn't ahead. Vulcan played like he did last split, but this time he has somebody that's going to follow up and somebody that's probably talking to him, and I feel like the communication on the team has gotten better. Just by watching these games, it looks like their communication is better. Now, they still have to work on their execution a little bit more, and that will come with a little bit more time, a little bit more practice, but I think by the middle of this split, this guys can be a middle-of-the-pack team that could be contending for playoffs this time around. which could be pretty epic, and it's going to be, you know, their chance to try to prove they can make it to Worlds. Now, do I think these are a Worlds caliber team currently? No. Do I think they have the potential to become a contender to make it into the play-ins at Worlds? Yes, I think they definitely could. I feel like these guys have a shot at it. They just have to improve upon what they did well this weekend and fix what they did wrong. And that's a very easy and generalized way of saying get good scrubs. But it's, you know, I'm not here to give the opinions on what they need to fix. Their coach should be looking at what they need to fix. My job here is to just tell you there was good to look at this weekend. So just keep your, keep your chin up, guys. This goes for players and fans alike. I don't think this weekend was nearly as bad as it could have been. This weekend could have been last week of LCS where we lost to a sub team and then, we don't play our, starting mid laner and we put Piglet and ADC into mid who didn't do terribly, but like on, overall didn't do great either. But I think, team morale looks better. It seems healthier. Towards the end of last split, everybody looked a little bit down. So I think, this split, it looks like they're getting a bit better. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I know it was kind of a little bit jumpy with my topic on the topic today, or my talk about the topic today, rather. But I hope you found it a little bit entertaining, and maybe you could look at this a little bit more positively than you initially did for this weekend. And I hope to see you guys in my next video. Maybe it's going to be my podcast. Maybe it's another one of these talks about Clutch Gaming. I'm going to try to do a Clutch Gaming video every week, maybe, as kind of like a summary of the weekend and kind of, talk about whether or not it was individual play, team play. Maybe there was something that went well. Maybe it's just to be hyped because they win games. Who knows? If you guys have any recommendations of stuff you want to see in the future, anything you want me to talk about in the future, please leave it down below in the comments. And in the meantime, if you wouldn't mind subscribing and liking the video, and then maybe following me on my Twitch for when I do stream occasionally, you can watch me there. Anyhow, guys, thank you again so much for watching this video, and I hope you all have yourself a wonderful, wonderful day.